Hello, really well-beings. Dr. Bharti here with a video all about eating well. Now, one of the things that we cover in our one-to-one and group sessions and sometimes corporate sessions is all about how we can nourish ourselves up, mind, bodies and spirits. Now, I think about eating as anything that comes into ourselves, so in terms of our food, as well as our information, so the media and the relationships that we're involved in, and also any other aspects, so sunlight and other things that come into our system. And I've used a bubble model to describe these processes, which have been hugely helpful and go beyond the obvious that most people think about and all of the other sort of techniques that have around at the moment. So I hope you enjoy this slightly unique view on things. So I tend to picture us in our bodies or as our entities as like bubbles that are floating along the water, and sometimes the water is choppy and sometimes it's relatively still. And like every bubble, to be healthy, it needs to be fluid and dynamic, it needs to be connected, and it needs to be nourished by what comes in and what goes out. And if it's out of balance, then that bubble is likely to pop and lose its sparkle. Now, most things and most people, when they think about eating, just think about what goes in, so what they add. Whereas I like to think about the ins and outs of eating well. And I think about what goes in and what goes out and what happens when it's within that bubble. So what we add, what comes in, and what's accepted. So sometimes it may not be appropriate and that bubble just needs to let that, whatever it is, pass. But if it is appropriate, it adds it and then it comes in. And then once it's in, how is that bubble nourished by it? Think of it like the ripples moving across the bubble, rebalancing and re-equilibrating. And then how is that dispersed? How does that bubble get rid of what it doesn't need, or apply that and apply what it's got, say its energy, effectively? So think about those as ripples going into the water. And then the last part is about surrender. It's about the needing to not try, but just be part of a bigger cycle. So there's kind of like the river flowing, and it's the bigger water cycle that goes beyond it. Now within that, I think about how can I do each of these four aspects, or how can we, when I meet someone, do each of those four aspects well? So I think about doing them all right. And I think about them in terms of doing the right thing, the right way, the right reasons, and at the right time. And I'll just give you one example, just looking at how we can add well. So thinking about our nutrition and what we can add well. I look at what's the right thing. So it varies from person to person at different stages of their lives. And having taught this in the medical school for quite a while, I realised that every year the advice changes and what's needed changes. So the key part is actually just showing up with a degree of interest and a capacity to tune into what you need. And in doing so, you then suddenly realise that the right thing may not be what's always offered to you. Sometimes you just learn to say, you know what, that's not quite right for me. And you can let it pass. And sometimes it means your identity changes. So certain foods that did seem to make sense, like that cake, if someone gave you a cake, suddenly doesn't quite match that alcohol, and so you get to know who your identity is. And once you're clear about that you're a really well-being, then suddenly these choices seem to make themselves with little or no effort necessary. So the right thing at the moment, current literature says most humans would benefit from eating, and the planet would potentially from eating mostly veg, but mix it up, perhaps a little bit of flesh from some other source, so from nuts, from eggs, from fish, and even from meats. We do know each of them has a balance, and so it's just like alchemy food. It's trying to choose what's right for you. And by paying attention, you can find out. So mostly veg, mixing it up, seasonal and local if possible, mix up the colours as well. It's eating just the right amount, so not too much, so that you're actually still hungry and hungry for life when you're done, rather than bloated and about to explode. So that's some of the things, and we look at strategies to make it easy. So you can plan it, buy it, eat it, and enjoy it. And we work out strategies about how you can make a plan and do as you plan to. We call that map adapt, so that if things don't go according to plan, you get better each time. And so there's no fear about making mistakes too. The next part is about eating in the right way. So making sure that when you are eating, you're perhaps setting up it so it's actually joyful for you. So there's no sense of regret or resentment. Making sure when you're eating, you're giving it your full attention. So your body and your hormones are ready to adjust and to assimilate this food. So various strategies to look into how to do that well, how you can use your teeth and chew and enjoy to get the most out of your food too, how you can use the right sort of cutlery and the right sort of plates to do it. So all of these things, once you notice them, it suddenly becomes a pleasure, the actual art of eating. The next thing is about the right reasons. So many of us do things for various reasons. Whatever the reason is, in our experience, if you can mine it and get down to the why that sits on the love, and I use the word love knowing that it might be an evocative, emotive word, it's by far the best way of eating. Because not only what we eat, but also the meaning behind it changes our body chemistry. Our body chemistry changes it if you're eating something because you love it rather than out of fear or regret or manipulation. You nourish yourself far better by it. So a perfect example is kind of yo-yo dieting and strategies like that, where people are actually eating something they don't really want to eat by virtue of punishing themselves for that cake they shouldn't have eaten earlier. Then actually just breeds tension and resentment, and that means you don't actually get nourished, so you're not sated, and therefore later on you might raid the fridge at midnight or whatever, trying to comfort yourself for that comfort you didn't receive. So whatever you're eating, if you can harness the love that's beneath it, that fact that you love your body and you want to give it the best it can, then that will mean you get satisfied and nourished. And then the other part is about timing. Now, it's unusual if you do think about the right time, but there are times when the waves are ready to catch and the waves aren't ready to catch. And we know, looking at current evidence, that it's really important that you eat according to your body's rhythms, not necessarily that of some external source. And that might mean eating slightly out of sync with your family or slightly out of sync with culture. But interestingly, if you're aware of it, you can find a way to make it work for you so you feel nourished rather than depleted during the day. A perfect example is resting the gut. So we know our inflammatory markers in our gut does really well if you allow it a long period of rest. Think of it like a motorway that's being shut so it can be cleansed and clean the whole system. And so by thinking about the right time for you to eat and the right thing at the right time so that it nourishes you for the task ahead. And the crux part of it is it's right now. So if you're about to embark on something, we know that if you've made the decision right now and plan it, your body is already preparing itself to do well with it. And you can actually enjoy it, anticipate that delicious, healthy, nourishing food that's going to love your system as you love it. So that's just one of the aspects that we look at when we look at how we can eat well. There are many more, including how you can be nourished by the food once it's inside you, and how you can disperse it, including emptying your bowels, evacuating, and also harnessing that energy, because we need to move and express it. So those ripples, that legacy we leave behind, means a lot to us. And then surrender, the capacity to deeply relax, which allows possible deeper integration and connection with our environment, so that our environments are nourished by us as we're nourished by them. Those are a few of the things that we look at. I hope it makes sense, and I wish you a wonderful life. Bye for now.